job today is to moderate a session entitled Domestic or Global Public Policy, a big question mark. A year ago, when the organizers of this conference was thinking about the themes to cover, and this is one of the big themes that was in their mind. We have 2-day meetings the first day, but for our academics, this is more thing of substance because that has more closely related to the things we do. So we take that very seriously. At the suggestion of Patrick and Libby, each participating schools is supposed to write a position paper. But then when we take that job back, and in the process we found it a little bit difficult because within the school, and actually it's very difficult to reach a consensus. What is the collective wisdom of the school? The opinions are very diversified. And I guess it's especially true in China. I cannot speak for other schools, but I can speak for my school. The professors have a variety of opinions of what is our position. But at the end of the day, it's Associate Professor Zhu Tianbiao who wrote the position paper. But 2 days ago, because of some change of the schedule, he asked me to moderate the session. So I have been working as a firefighter. When there is a fire, I will move in to put down the fire. You have all have a collection of position papers, I presume. And I'm not going to repeat what is written here, so if you have time, you can read that. But I sort of will say something about what I think of some of the issues that have something to do with this topic, domestic or global public policy. And I'm going to cover 3 areas. One is, what is a theory? To me, theory is about a logic. And if we observe the world can manifest itself in all multiple forms. But behind all those forms there is a logic. So a good theory can be measured in 3 dimensions. One is it's about parsimonious. You cannot use a lot of words to describe the logic. Use as few words as possible to describe the logic. So there's much about being parsimonious if our concern is about theory. Then the next dimension is scope. Now, if one theory can explain only one case, it's not theory. It's an ad hoc approach. Theory has to be concerned about scope. If you use a logic that can be applied to one country, another country, another country, and if scope is the largest, the theory can claim to have more explanatory power. And the third dimension, of course, is accuracy. But then, physically, we are always constrained by the physical forms of whatever we're dealing with. But that form will be constrained over time and space. But the logic will work as something I would sort of, it's a beacon of light. You have a direction to overcome the physical constraints, and eventually you have a direction. So in that sense, if we say domestic policy or public policy, what interests me is that when I look at the world, look at every country, in some areas, some countries are doing better than others. For instance, if we are concerned about productivity, and I look at all countries, some countries are having a better, higher level of productivity. So in that sense, probably their policy designs is better designed so that they make every citizen more productive than others. Each one has 24 hours a day. And I think a good policy is a coordination mechanism. The good policy should coordinate in such a way that everyone should be as productive as possible. We spend each day in 3 ways: productively, non-productively, and counterproductively. So a good policy, no matter that the policy exists in one country or another, to me is the one that coordinates human behavior in such a way that we maximize our productive hours and minimize our non- and counterproductive hours. So I do not see divides between domestic and global best practice. I tend not to use global policy because the very moment I mention policy, it indicates there is an element of coercion. Behind each policy, there is an element of coercion. So usually when we say public policy, where what I can think of is the hierarchy behind us. Even within the family, you say we have a family policy, there is also an element of coercion. And you use that coercion violently, or or you persuade your kids. But whichever the case, to me there is an element of coercion. So will you use the coercion to gradually overcome the physical constraints you face, given time and space, and with the beacon of light? That's the question each of us will have to face. Now, the second area I cover is so-called Chinese experience. To me, Chinese experience, the word Chinese experience can be very misleading. China is so vast. Do we have the same experience? Of course, we do not have the same experience. If we do have the notion of Chinese experience, is Chinese experience more diverse, say, from experience of Great Britain or US? Or, say, the experience of Shenzhen, is that closer to Hong Kong, or is it closer to the interior parts of China? My observation is that the experience of Shenzhen probably is closer to Hong Kong, if we take Hong Kong as a model closer to international experience, than the experience of interior parts of China. Then if we're talking about the experience in Tibet, then I can be very certain the experience of Shenzhen probably is closer to the experience of Hong Kong than the experience we have in part of China called Tibet or Xinjiang. So the very moment we say Chinese experience, to me, it can be very misleading, depending on the time and space we are talking about. So we need to be very sensitive to the actual conditions we are dealing with. Yesterday, I remember there was a session about the value debates. And we have Professor Pan Wei saying China model. But the very moment he mentioned China model, we have a professor and Dean Hu Wei offering counter arguments against the China model. So, as you can see, even within China, there are diversities of experiences. There are diversities of world outlook, how we look at this world. So, as scholars, we need to be very sensitive when we use those stereotyped terms, Chinese experience or Chinese model or Western countries. To me, when I look at Western countries, having had experience of interacting with professors from France, UK, US, and also having had experience of having programs involving professors globally from UK, France, United States. And our students also realize, even when we look at Western countries, there is a diversity. If we are talking about the way they approach the questions, if we are talking about the ways they look at the world. The third thing that I will talk about is I tend to use an analogy inspired by the Olympic Games. It's like a gaming. Now, if we look at one game, and globally, we say there are different leagues. League A, League B, League C. If League A is the first notch, League B is somewhere in the middle, and the League C is at the bottom. Now the challenge for us, or the decision we have to make is, for our school to progress, which league do you choose to play games with? If the school of government belongs to League B, we have three choices. We can play games with League A, we can play games with League B, or we can choose to play games with League C. I guess if we choose to play games with League C, short term, we'll feel very happy, because the chances are every time we have a game with a member of League C, we'll win. So we are very happy. But I guess over time, the skills we'll have will not progress, will regress as a matter of probabilities. Now, if we choose to play games with League B, sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're not happy, but basically more or less we are okay. But I guess the chances for us to progress is also slim. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but we just don't know over time. Then if we choose to play games often and frequently with League A, I guess the chances for us to progress will be the greatest among the three choices. So for us, I guess our general approach is we need to play games with League C. We also need to play games with League B. But most importantly and strategically, we must be very firm in terms of deciding that we have to devote a tremendous amount of time to play games with League A. Now, in that context, that is why the School of Government is very interested in learning best practice internationally. And I guess that indicates our answer to the general question of domestic and the public policy. And with that note, I'm going to end my presentation here and do a very brief introduction to the very distinguished panels who will represent the best, the top schools of public policy in China. We have two from Shanghai, one from Nanjing, and two from Beijing, School of Government, Peking University. Geographically is located in Beijing. And over there we have Wu Yongping, who is the Associate Dean of the School of Public Policy and Management at Tsinghua University. Wu Yongping is second. And we have also Professor Wang Jiandong, who is Assistant President of Nanjing University and also Professor of School of Public Management at Nanjing University. And we also have Shang Yuchen from Fudan University, School of International Relations and Public Affairs. And Hu Wei, Professor Hu Wei, who also made a very interesting question yesterday, who is the Dean of the School of International and Public Affairs at Jiao Tong University. Without much ado, I will yield the floor to them, and I will ask Hu Wei first to give a presentation at the maximum of, well, since other people choose 8, so I also follow their example. Within 8 minutes. Yeah, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the sponsor to give me such a good opportunity to speak here. I think this was a very good opportunity for me to make a free advertisement of my school. And I will pay no advertising fee. And this is the no free lunch. And what is more, because just this week we are celebrating our 5th anniversary of my school, and we'll just have a conference, international conference on Thursday and also a ceremony on Friday. And His Excellency Mr. Nakasone, the former Japanese Prime Minister, will also visit us and make a speech at my school and also receive an honorary professorship from John University. So welcome all of you, if you have time, to participate in the ceremony. John University is one of the top universities in China and currently is among the top 5. But it used to be a technology-oriented one. So we can see there are famous alumni of Jiaotong University. For example, former President Jiang Zemin of China, also the party leader. But much to my regret, he was a graduate from engineering, but not management or just public policy. Because at that time, there were no such educational or research field at Jiaotong University. Of course, in China, we used to have such technocrats who just govern China. So if in the West countries, we can read some books, for example, titled To Govern America or To Govern the Great Britain. But I just found a scholar who wrote an article that to engineer China. That is, in China, technocrats are very popular in the past 2 decades. But recently, we're just developing social science very rapidly, especially at Jiaotong University. So my school is just a good example. Though we only have a 5 years history, we developed very rapidly in the past 5 years. And because it is very new, we just have a very new strategy for the development. We can have a zero-based planning, that we can have whatever we want, whatever which is good. So at my school, internationalization is a very important strategy. So we just try to establish the partnership or close collaboration with some research or educational institutions in the world. We just signed agreement with Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs, and also the RAND Corporation and its graduate school, and also Moscow State Institute of International Relations, and also the University of Bergen, many other universities and institutions. And we just send the faculty and the student to go abroad to study. So in this area, I think not only we just have some partnership in the world, but also we have some international faculty. Currently, we just have, I think, almost 20% of the faculties who just obtained PhD abroad. And we just have very international curriculum and syllabus. So I think internationalization is a very good strategy for the school, especially for the school such as mine, who is a new school, to develop, to make a very rapid development in the past years. Of course, a very important thing is how to manage the relationship of internationalization and localization, because we are in China. So just yesterday we just debate how to manage the particularism and the universalism. I think it's the same, how to manage internationalization and localization. So I think we just have two kinds of strengthen two kinds of collaboration. First, we strive to establish partnerships with foreign institutions. I just mentioned many collaborations with the overseas universities or schools or institutions. And on the other hand, we also pay much attention to have collaboration with the Chinese government, especially in the local level. My school just signed an agreement with the Shanghai municipality to training the young promising public officials for the Shanghai. So they will be the leaders of Shanghai in the future, and currently they have also already have some important positions in the party and the government. And my school is just the only one school in Shanghai who have such collaboration with Shanghai municipality. Each year, they will just send about 70 to 80 candidates to apply the NP program at my school, and because they have to pass the national examination, about 50 can be recruited to my school to study. And also we just have a lot of program with the government, including the training program and also research and consultation. If you just you read the brochure of the participants of this conference, there are my brief introduction. You can see that I'm the member of the consultative board of both of Shanghai Municipality and the Shanghai People's Congress. So we are very actively involved in the policy making of Shanghai and the localities in China. So I think, on the one hand, we just strengthen the collaboration with international institutions, international educational and academic institutions, and on the other hand, we just have very close collaborations with the Chinese government. Then we can manage the internationalization and the localization. And most importantly, I think, for academic research and educational institutions for public policies, we should teach the students theories. Just as Dean Fujun just mentioned, theory is very important. So they just can use this theory, utilize this theory in their policy-making process. They are public officials in China. They can just make policies in the context of China's situation. They know how to imagine it, but they need the theory. So as for the theory, I think because China's public policy or public affairs or public management or public administration study is very new. The NP program is just set up in the new century. It has a very short history. So we should draw experience of the foreign countries, especially the Western countries. And we should learn the theory of public policy and public management of Western countries. So I think this is very important. So for my school, I think we just teach them, I think most importantly, is the ontology, epistemology, methodology, and the terminology of public policy and public management. I think that's very important. Because in China, because some of you are from abroad, maybe you don't know, some terms were just introduced from Western countries, even for democracy or science. In China, we have no such word, democracy and science, no such equivalent of the language, in the language. So when the May 4th movement just introduced science and technology in China in the early 1920s, we didn't know how to translate these two terms. So they just translate democracy as 德先生 in in Chinese, that is Mr. D, because democracy, that's Mr. D, and science is 赛先生, that's Mr. Science. Mr. D and Mr. Science in Chinese. They don't know how to translate democracy and science. So you can see that in China, we need theories. We need the terms of in relating political science and public policy, public administration. So I think internationalization is very important in China. Of course, we also try to manage the relationship of domestic situation and international theory. That's all. And because of the time, I just stop here. And finally, thank you for your attention and welcome you visit my school at the convenience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dean Wu, for your excellent presentation. And next, let me invite Dean Wu to give a presentation on behalf of the School of Public Policy and Management at Tsinghua University.
Thank you, Professor Fuji. Good morning. Well, Professor Hu just said his school is quite young. We are celebrating the 10th anniversary. Fifth. Our school is also very young. We are celebrating the 8th anniversary. So I think this information just gives us just an impression about the history of the schools of public policy in China. It's new to us. Our school was established in the year 2000, so it's young. But in the very beginning, internationalization is our goal to achieve. So, as you know, China is a developing country, and we have a lot of problems and challenges which are needed to be addressed, to deal with. So, of course, domestic policies, public policy is our major focus. But as we living in the era of globalization, so in the very beginning we place all the domestic public policies in an international perspective or in the global context. It's not possible for us to make a clear cut between domestic issues and international issues. So that's why we very much emphasize a global context, a global view. For example, in these days, the topic of country reforms or land reforms in China is very hot. Many people view this issue as a possible way for China to overcome the impact of international financial crisis. So before, maybe we just view countryside issues in China or land issues in China just domestic issues. But now we view it as a way to overcome international shocks. So this is a typical example. So we are very active in public policy making, consultancy and advice in China. We are the faculty members in our school are widely involved in policy making process in government agencies, in a different level of government agencies. This is one thing I would like to stress. The other thing is that, as I just said, internationalization is our major goal. In the very beginning of the school was established, we have established wide connections with international community. With international academic community, we have a lot of connections with universities and academic institutes around the world, from North America to Asia, Europe, and we also have a lot of connections with international corporations like Toyota and other corporations. And we also have training programs. It's very important in nowadays China. Training government officials is one of the ways for the Chinese government to enhance, we call it a ruling capacity of the ruling party. So, training program is a very important part of the school task. We train thousands of government officials from different levels of government, from central government down to local government each year. And we also send many of them to be trained in other countries. For example, in the United States, we have a cooperation project with the Harvard University School of Kennedy School of Government. We have jointly trained government officials, quite high-ranking government officials with the Kennedy School, and also with other public institutes in the United States. For example, the Maxwell School in Syracuse and other institutes. The third one for our school is degree programs. Besides the degrees for Chinese students, we recently launched 2 international programs. One of them called Masters in International Development, which was established last year. And the other one is International Master of Public Policy and Management. The degree is the International Master of Public Administration, which was just launched this month. So we now have over 100 international students coming from 5 continents, from North America, from Latin America, from Asia, from Europe, and also from Africa. So I think it's one of the major efforts we have made to reach the goal of internationalization in the era of globalization. We are still trying hard to combining domestic goals and international goals together to address the issues we are facing in China, within China. Of course, there are domestic issues, but we address these issues in the international perspective or global perspective. So that's what I would like to share with you about our experience and our views about domestic or international or global public policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wu Yongping. And next, let me invite Professor Sang Yuchen to give his presentation representing Fudan University School of International Public Affairs.
Okay, thank you. Dear Professor Fu Jun, dear readers, dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to attend this meeting of public policy schools. And I'm glad to share our understanding of public policy and its domestic and international connections. This is especially relevant since we, as you know, we call the middle-aged Chinese, have all seen the unprecedented changes of China since the late 1970s through our own eyes. We directly noticed the change of China from closed to open and from regional to global. We can say that these changes were first and finally reflected by the change in China's public policies. So no doubt, China has been getting more involved in the global policy, both in processes and the causes. While international factors are having more influences on China's domestic policy making, the international consequences of China's domestic policies have also been increasingly felt. Such a process of mutual adoption is gradual, complex, and comprehensive, imbued with the risks of misunderstanding and failure. Consequently, we are facing growing difficult public issues that need both domestic and international input, and we need a more developed policy sciences. Public policy research and education in Fudan University have experienced a quick development in response to the huge social demands. Now our school have 3 departments. They are international politics, political science, and public administration. Naturally, we emphasize multidisciplinary research and education and policy issues. Traditionally, our faculty members did a good job in such as translating classic academic books and in introducing accepted theories to the Chinese academics and practitioners. In recent years, we've had more effects in doing comparative research, policy transfer, and global governance. A good sign is that researchers have begun to seriously examine the applicability of these important policy theories and in Chinese context, and to contribute to theory accumulations by doing the empirical research. Our faculty members have published on English journals like Public Administration and Development, imperial and theory-based research, acceptable by international standards, has been growing. This provides us the opportunity of having dialogues with the international colleagues and of doing joint research and education. Last year, 2007, the school organized the international conference. The title is Public Administration Research and Education in China Today. It had a special focus on the modernization of public administration research and education, and attracted many international and domestic scholars. We have a heated discussion on our status quo and our future. The English journal, Chinese Public Administration Review, has published a special issue for that conference. Our education emphasizes the training of future policy analysts and policy makers with a global vision. So every year we recruit about 650 students, including about 300 MPA students and about 60 foreign students. We have established a student cooperation with a couple of foreign universities, like Keio University in Japan, National University of Singapore, Science for Paris, and Peking University. We established the English-taught MA program in Chinese politics and diplomacy in 2005, and have recruited students from more than 30 countries. We make use of location in Shanghai metropolitan and offer training to local leaders students are exposed to theories developed in Western societies and are required to bridge them with the Chinese reality. Our final purpose, needless to say, is to seek excellence by encouraging innovative thinking. Our school has a keen interest in promoting students' awareness of and emphasis in the localization of global issues and globalization of local issues. For example, also in last year, 2007, we launched the Youth International Competition for Global Governance. So this year, we co-sponsored the competition with our Italian partners in Rome. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, at this moment, I would like to express our sincere hope to develop and strengthen our partnership with international public policy community through various imaginable ways. So you are always welcome to Fudan University. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sang. And last, let me invite Professor Huang to make his presentation representing Nanjing University. As you probably have noticed, he is sitting in the middle, and Beijing is in the north, Shanghai a little bit down in the south, and Nanjing sits somewhere in the middle. So I'm sensitive to space. Please.
Good morning, everyone. Dear Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me pleasure here to give a presentation for representing Nanjing University. First, I would like to say you are warmly welcome to visit Nanjing. You know, the Asian dynasty, the Asian capital for at least 6 dynasties in China. And also, Nanjing University is one of the top key universities. One of the 5 top universities in China. So, okay, I really like the topic of this conference is harmonizing globalization and seeking solutions to common problems. So, first I would like to say, you know, we are in a globalization age. Why globalization is deepening? While we are facing a lot of change, lot of challenges. For example, the financial turmoil is worsening. So at this wider moment, we have a conference here. So we need to search better solutions for the problem we are facing. So, as I mentioned above, at this wider moment, we cannot only rely on the governments. We remember that about 28 years ago, you know, the former president, Mr. Reagan, says, when he came to power, he said, I think you remember. So, at this crisis moment, government is not the solution. Government itself is the problem. So, we also know that what is government? Government, it is best state, it is, but a necessary evil. But its worst state, it is an intolerant evil. So, I think this is the reason, this is the value why we need to organize this conference. You know, the scholars come from different academic circles, join together to discuss, to offer our opinions, to try to find the solutions to respond to the challenges. But now, what is the solution? Of course, definitely, solution is the better policy to respond to the problem. we are facing. So that is the reason why I have strong interest in to join this conference. Now, I would like to make 4 points as below. The first is about how to understand public policy in the perspective of public management. Fundamentally speaking, public policy is something to deal with the problem raised from the realm of public life and activity, including all those divergences in conflicts within and between societies, whereby the human species goes about organizing the use, production, and distribution of human, natural, and other resources in the course of the production and reproduction of its biological and social life, by which to maintain and facilitate the order and harmony of the society. While here I would like to emphasize the meaning, the significance of public policy, because in my opinion, I consider public policy is very important. It's one of the most important instruments of performing the duties of public management. This is my first part. Of course, according to what I mentioned about, public policy should be public interest oriented, service oriented, and interest balancing oriented. This is my first part. The second part, that's concerning about the contribution of public policy making of China during the past 3 decades. Why I need to talk about this? Because the organizer of this conference asked us to discuss the topic of domestic or global policy. Because I consider these 2 aspects have very close relations. That means during the past 3 decades, China, as you know, had made a great progress and made a great achievement nowadays in the world. It doesn't matter the people like or dislike China. No one now in the world can deny the achievement China made during the past 3 decades. And why China can make such a great achievement? In short, to answer this question, just one sentence. Just because during the past 30 years, China made better policy to improve the productivities, to improve people's living standards, to strengthen the comprehensive state powers. So this is the first of the first part, first aspect of the first part. The second, why I have interest to talk about this topic, about China's contribution in public policy making to the world, because China is the country developing faster among those developing countries, and among those countries with longest civilization history, and also developing the faster, the best among all those countries in transition. What means transition? That means economic transition. From the highly centralized economic system transfer to the market-driven economic system. Among all those transition countries, China is the one developing faster at the best. And also China is the country developing faster, farthest among those countries with the largest populations. So For this reason, I think the public policy China made during the past 30 years is a great contribution to the world's public policy making and also implementation. So this is the second part of my speech about the contribution of China's public policy making. The third one, I would like to talk about the balancing of the universal value or the core value with the legitimacy. Yesterday, some scholars offered their very good opinions in discussing this issue about whether there is a universal value, whether we can share a core value, and how to think about this, and how to, make this can be, implemented in our public policy. In my opinion, of course, no doubt, definitely, there are universal values we can share in the world. But wherever in making public policy, we need to think about that. Whether the public policy have enough legitimacy. As talking about the legitimacy for any parties in power, for any governments, for any academical institute or scholars, we need to think about that. As we're talking about the legitimacy, at least it covers 3 levels of meaning. The first level is the legitimacy about the political idea and the political thinking. Whether this idea, whether this political thinking can be accepted, can be supported by people. This is the first level. And the second level is about the institution, the constitution, the policy. That is something written on the paper. The first level is something written on the flag. Parties, governments. And the third level about the legitimacy is concerning about the performance of the government, the achievements, the result they make, whether they can, in the reality, can, make real achievements, can be, really improving people's lives, promote the economic development. Between these 3 levels of legitimacy, of course, there are gaps between these 3 ones. Something you say this is your idea, is very good, political idea or political thinking, but it cannot be made in the institutional level. But something you made as a very good policy or a very good constitution or institution maybe cannot be implemented in the real level. So what is the standard to find better policy? What is the standard to judge the policy when is legitimate or not? We can here use the standard of former leader Mr. Deng Xiaoping. That is very famous theory, that is cat theory. It makes no difference whether you are black or white cat, so long as you catch mouse. So that is the very important, principle for us to judge which is the better policy. For this reason, we can say that. What is the standard? What is the criterion? Definitely, practice is the sole criterion of testing skills. Here, I would like to mention that before the launching of the reform and opening up to the outside world, it was a lecturer of Nanjing University. It was the first time he wrote a paper to send forth this issue, to send forth that. Practice is the sole criterion of testing the truth. And then, in the nationwide, Chinese government, the CPC, Central Committee, launched the debate about the criterion of testing the truth. Based on the debating of this discussion, then we can launch the reform, and then we can have today, and then we can have the achievement. Now, after 3 decades, we have a new China. So, this is the third one, the third part of my speech, just about we need to balance the relations between the value and legitimacy. The last one, the fourth part I would like to make here is concerning about we need to balance the relations between 3 most important forces, 3 most important mechanisms. That is, some scholars mentioned yesterday about government, market, and society. Nowadays, it is the most relation we need to deal with, we need to balance today. Now, America, just from America, the financial turmoil, raised from that country. What is the main reason for this financial turmoil? I would like to quote a saying of this year's Economy Nobel Prize winner, Krugman. He says, the main reason about this financial turmoil is just the American government failed to effectively perform its duty to supervise, to monitor, to regulate the market. This is just like something 78 years ago. A great depression happened in the world. Now, after nearly 80 years, the same thing happened again. So, for this reason, here I would like to mention that. I would like to conclude that why China can achieve such a great achievement during the past 3 decades. The main reason we can summarize as one word, one sentence, just because we adopt a series of better policy to adjust the relations between government and market and society. To balance the role of these 3 mechanisms. So, therefore, in my opinion, I would like to say that, for searching the better policy, for searching the solution to our common problem, we need to balance the relations of the value and the legitimacy. We need to balance the relationship between the government, market, and society. Thank you. I would like to end my speeches. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Wang. While I was listening to the very excellent presentations, I was doing a little bit of statistics. The term internationalization has appeared frequently for Jiao Tong University and Tsinghua University, also Fudan University, and use a different term, I guess, reflecting the same idea for Nanjing University, globalization. So apparently internationalization is a key element of what the top schools of public policy here in China have been doing very rigorously. Now my question is, I'm sort of picking on the themes based on the themes to raise a number of questions. And the second term is interdisciplinary. I did not mention that. Jiao Tong University did not mention that, if I remember correctly. Tsinghua did not mention that explicitly, probably implicitly. Nanjing University did not mention that implicitly. Fudan University mentioned that explicitly. So it's also a theme I think that we should be interested in elaborating on that. And the third one is better policies, which has been emphasized rigorously by Professor Wang representing Nanjing University. So let me start with the first key term, internationalization. Now my question to Wu Wei, Dean of School of International and Public Affairs. The Chinese, I know the Chinese term for the schools, but the English translation for the name tend to vary on the margin a little bit. It's easier for us to say internationalization, but in practice, if we operate in the reality, if the speed is too much, there are going to be resistance. Now, if that's the case in your school, what kind of things do you do sort of to ameliorate the resistance so that you can be, quote unquote, smooth in the strategic orientation that you want to pursue?
And I don't think there are severe resistance at my school for internationalization, but there are really some resistance from China society, especially for theories, because most of the theory in public policy and management of administration are introduced from Western scholarship. So there are some resistance against such introduction. So some scholars just said we need localization rather than internationalization. We need practice. Practice is the most important thing. And my question is, could we practice without theory? No. First one just mentioned the Deng Xiaoping's doctrine. No matter the cat is white and black, the cat that can catch mouse is a good cat. But there also are some ideas, theories, because we knew that only cat, or not only cat, but usually cat can catch mouse. That's the idea, that's the theory. If there is chicken, can chicken catch mouse? No. So I think we need theory. How to manage a relationship between government, market, and the society. Why we just stipulate such an idea? Because we have theory. We just introduced the theory of market from Western democracies. We just introduced the civil society theory and NGO, NPO theory from Western democracies. So we knew we should manage the relationship between these different forces and mechanisms. So I think that's very important. But some people don't agree with this idea. They just practice-oriented or just very pragmatic. So they don't care theory. They don't like internationalization. But at my school, I think the most important for internationalization is, first, we should find some funding because we have no enough money for internationalization. Internationalization usually costs a lot. So the funding is a big problem. And secondly, I think, is personnel. Because usually in China university, there are a lot of scholars who have less international experience. So if we just recruit the internationalized scholars, they will resist. But as for my school, this situation is not too serious because my school is a new one. We just create from scratch. So, of course, I also face some such problem. There are some old faculty members from Jiaotong University. Before I moved to Jiaotong from Fudan University, there are already only a few faculty members in public administration. But I just deal with very sophisticated and very smoothly. So currently, nobody just can resist to recruit international scholars. But the problem is that it is very difficult to recruit such sophisticated international scholars. It's very expensive, very expensive. So currently we just introduced some scholars just recently, and some very top scholars internationally. But I cannot tell you the name, it's a business secrecy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, continue on the theme of internationalization, Tsinghua University has been doing very impressively. They have launched a couple of programs that is being taught in English. And my understanding is, well, this is a difficult area for Chinese institutions to offer programs at the moment in English. I guess the business school is doing better because MBA has been here for longer than MPA program. So, Dean Wu Yongming, would you share with us what you have done to overcome that difficulty to be so successful in launching programs for English?
Thank you. I think the question of the relationship between internationalization and globalization is very interesting. I personally think the two terms are changeable in the context in the Chinese environment. The reason for us to speak internationalization much more than globalization, I think it's a very typical Chinese discourse. My personal understanding is that, on the one hand, China is one of the biggest beneficiaries of globalization in the past 3 decades. But on the other hand, we are very sensitive about globalization. So then we just pick up the nice part of globalization to be addressed. So in official discourse, we call globalization as economic globalization. We don't use globalization as a general term to describe the process. That means we have a selecting view about globalization. We just want the nice part of globalization. That means economic development. We don't like the part we don't like, which mostly refers to political dimension, ideological dimension. So I think it's the basic situation why we use internationalization much more than globalization. But in fact, the two terms is not much different in my view. So when we use internationalization, we mean globalization. That means we accept more standards and norms which is practiced by the national community, and also want to be more integrating part of international or global community. That is one thing I want to clarify. The other one about your question. It's true, it's not easy for us to launch the English programs right now at this moment. We are facing many difficulties to to make the programs successful. One of the problems we are facing is language problem. In our school is quite internationalized. Forgive me, I use internationalization again. We enroll, we recruit staff members from abroad. That means Chinese young scholars got PhD, got trained in Western universities and then come back to our school, to join our school. So this is the efficient way, the good way for us to solve language problems. So far, I'm proud to say that we are able to handle this question. But I think the bigger challenge is how to make a balance between the general theories and the knowledges and the perspectives about development, about public policy, about public administration, and the Chinese experience. You just made your comments about the term of Chinese experience. It's true. So one of the biggest challenges or questions we need to answer is that our international students have high expectations, especially those from Asia, from Africa, from those developing countries. They are anxious to know the so-called Chinese experience or Chinese development model. How does China achieve the impressive economic development in the past 3 decades? And some of the students told us that you need to tell us how have you achieved the achievement. Well, personally, I think it's a hard question. It's a great challenge for us to answer such question. Well, this year is the 30th anniversary of Chinese open up and reform. So a lot of discussions, a lot of research have come up about how China has achieved great achievement in the past 3 decades. So far, what I've seen, the explanations, the views, the points are quite conflicting. My personal opinion is that we don't know yet how we have achieved our achievements in the past 3 decades. Good policy, as Professor Huang just said, good policy, good institutions. No, I don't think so. Well, in my personal opinion, I have done a lot of research on industrial policies in China in the past 3 decades. I haven't seen a successful industrial policy in China. Almost all industrial policy ended in failure. Good institutions, I don't know. So I think it's a big challenge for us to give our views or opinions or points about why China has been so successful. So it's our challenge to make a balance between general theories and the Chinese real experience. I think the major challenge for our program is this. I don't know if I have answered the question.
We'll come back to better policies. But before that, let us look at the issue of interdisciplinary. I remember yesterday I mentioned if I look at the School of Government, in our case it's a combination of both a political science department. I said at risk of oversimplification, a combination of a political science department and a professional school. If it's a political science department, it's easily understood by Western scholars. Then a professional school. If I look at Princeton, Yale, Harvard, I see elements of political science, law, economics, sociology, very strong elements of sociology, psychology, in the case of Princeton, and a bit of history. Now, Professor Zhang, how do you look at the issue of interdisciplinary approach to the building, the construction of a serious policy schools in your case?
Okay. Just Professor Hu and was mentioned that their schools are the new schools, just 5 or 8 years. established a school of international relations and public affairs in 2000, 8 years ago. But before that, we called the Department of International Politics, that's at Peking University. So Beijing University, after that, there's some type of schools, as you know, and all university established the schools, so not so much. So very nice. So just I mentioned that we have the state parts, the international politics and political science and administration, and I think that this maybe is more better than the subject, because we have the multidisciplinary research. Every scholar, every members have the view of the international. So we have the international background. And you know, so this campus we have my colleague of mine, also my assistant Jing Jia come here, and he is maybe is the examples about the domestic and the international connections. May I ask Jing to say something?
Very briefly, please.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Jia Jing from Peking University. So just now, Professor Wu talked about the interdisciplinary, relation between different disciplines. So as a matter of fact, this kind of cooperation within our school is natural, because in our school there are three departments: international politics, political science, and public administration. And firstly, so there was a department of international politics, and for the other two disciplines, they originated from international politics. Okay, so naturally for the faculty members, for example, the faculty members in my department, public administration, so some of them have the background in political science, some of them have the background in international politics. So they can easily think from beyond public administration perspective, and due to the structure of the school, we always have meetings together. So it's quite easy for us to rapidly exchange our ideas for our students that are exposed to different courses of different disciplines. And the good thing is that in recent years, so people in different departments, they begin to co-author some papers. For example, I did a paper with my colleague in political science department. So that's a good thing. So because I know that this is very difficult for people, in every discipline they have their own niche. They like to talk with the people who they identify with. But in the future, I think this kind of cooperation will be increasing. And here, I also want to comment if the chairman allows me to do that. Okay.
Very briefly, please.
Okay, thank you. So today, just one comment. We have the topic, global or domestic public policy. I think this is very interesting, thoughtful, important, but also invasive. So maybe there is one underlying assumption that is, okay, for the public policies, they are socially constructed. So what the policies are, how we should do policies, naturally depends on how we look at them, or depends on the conceptual frameworks or conceptual lens we use to adopt. So actually, Grant and Allison talked about this 4 decades ago. Okay, 4 decades ago. So if that's all, then we can feel quite satisfied. Okay, we can just look at things as we like. But the problematic thing is that that's not all. So public policies have to be examined by reality. Public policies have to be empirically tested. Okay, you have to argue. So that's where the problem comes. So there is always a gap between the reality and our conceptual lens. And many times the reality develops faster than our conceptual lens. So we have to try, as the policy scholars, we have to try to that's not just a problem for China, but also for all the world. Okay. So I think if we get back to China, if we think about global or domestic, the major problem is that now we have the lack of the global perspective, and that kind of insufficiency also creates a problem for us to get back to amplify or enrich the domestic perspective. So we take a lot of measures, a lot of solutions. For example, we send students abroad. We recruit PhDs with foreign university degrees, and we send our faculty members abroad to have some short-term training. And we have a lot of international conferences or exchanges. But I think they are just the starting points. The most important thing is to what extent we can communicate with each other using international standards laws. Use commonly accepted laws or standards. For example, if I ask you, how many of you have ever co-authored?
No examples as briefly as possible, because time is running out.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Okay. Or if I ask the Chinese scholars, how many of you have ever co-authored with foreign scholars, especially as the first author? So I think this is even important, and there is a lot to be done in the future. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for talking so much.
Thank you very much to share with us the experience from your school on the policy, better policies. Very exciting and sexy. But the question I have is, what is the key elements if we claim that we have better policies? Because when I look at the United States, you mentioned the balance between government and the market. And even look at the United States, look at their founding fathers. Jeffersonian approach is more on the side of the market. Madison's approach is more on the side of the state. But if you look at the history of the United States, there are ups and downs between the two approaches. So it's a balancing thing. Now, if we claim that we have better policies, in terms of directions, has the experience of China moving from a powerful government more to the market or the other way around? Because we need to find some of the key elements so that we can learn lessons from what we have been doing as of today so far. And what are the future directions that China will be moving if we continue what we will call better policies? Now, it's the question to Professor from Fudan University, of the Nanjing University.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. So, yeah, that's an important issue. So, Professor Wu mentioned that. He said there is no better policy. But we can say that concerning about the policy, of course we say that not best policy. We say better policy than before. Without adopting the better policy, there will be no progress we made during the past 3 decades. So, as for answer the question, Professor Hu mentioned about, just now, first I need to confirm that now we are trying in the course of adjusting the relations between government and the market, and between government and society. We can say that during the past 30 years, we really did a lot in balancing the relations between government and the market. But comparatively, we did less in dealing with the relations between government and society. Just from about 2003, it was beginning Chinese government to realize we need to use the problem, thence to handle the relations between government and society. So gradually, the government, the power, the party in power, that is CPC, gradually understand that we need to adopt the policy people first, or we can say people's life first, people's interest first. That is the most important issue now among all those public policies adopted now in China. So, looking back in history, in considering the situation now, we can make a perspective for the future. I personally believe that China can make more progress in improving these three relations, in balancing these relations. For example, recently, I noticed that the General Secretary, Mr. Hu Jintao, often mentioned that we need to, deal with the relations between government and the market, between government and the society. So, I believe that those top leaders now understand the significance of this. This is the first. The second, about the better policy in the future. In my speech, I mentioned about that. The Chinese public policy making is the great contribution to the world's public policy. On one hand, we are doing a lot of policy innovation. On the other hand, we need to mention that during the past 3 decades, we introduced a lot of policy from other countries, especially those developed countries. So, economically, managerially, and other aspects. Not only capital, not only introducing capital, technology, science, but also economy, management, methods, theories, approaches, and so on. So, one thing, we promote the policy innovation ourselves. On the other hand, we continually keep introducing the good policy from other countries. We learn from other countries. So, therefore, I believe that with this emphasis, we can keep going towards making better policy and better solution to our problem.
Thank you. Let me see. What questions do you have from the audience?
Hi, I'm Steve Ballard from the School of Government here at Peking University and George Washington University's School of Public Policy and Public Administration in Washington, D.C. Also a school that's less than 10 years old, by the way. My question is, what is the current state of affairs of research methods, training, and education here at China's top schools of public policy? By research methods training, I mean everything from epistemology to research design, to measurement, to qualitative and quantitative data analysis. To what extent is an emphasis put on students learning critical thinking skills and becoming better consumers and perhaps even producers of social scientific research? Thank you.
Thank you. What do I do is to collect the questions first. Then,
I'm Peter Cheung from the University of Hong Kong's MBA program. I also have a similar set of questions about the curriculum, which I believe would reflect the globalization or internationalization that you just mentioned. For instance, it seems to me that a lot of the schools emphasize economics a lot. So how many courses of economics or economic analysis are found in the program? More specifically, I also want to know how much English literature, literature in English in the area of public opinion or public policy would be adopted in the school. Now by this I mean that, of course, not necessarily English literature addressing American problems, but English literature addressing Chinese problems. I believe American PA is very local, only about the US, but the use of the medium of language in the literature. And also I understand case writing has been very popular in a lot of PA schools in China. So I wonder whether your school also has a case writing program, and do you adopt case teaching? Thank you.
Business School at the University of Southern California. I was wondering if if you or one of the other colleagues could tell us a little bit about the relationship between the great public policy schools at your universities and the party schools, the higher level party schools and around the country. In other words, do your students go into government, or do your students study government when they come out? And what is this relationship? And are the party schools the secret of China's economic development?
Well, let's start with the first question, the research methodology. Anyone want to have a crack at that?
I would like to respond to the question. It's a good question. We are trying to use public policy and public administration is quite interdisciplinary area, which concerns many different disciplines, like political science, economics, management, law, sociology, and so on. So when we recruit the faculty members, we are very careful about the composition of the faculty. So our faculty members comes from majorly from these 5 areas. So that provides a very solid foundation for us to design and to provide the curriculum. So we are trying to offer basic methodology training for the students. So in the curriculum, we offer the courses of quantitative analysis. What you just said, it's quite economical orientation. But we also provide other methodologies or tools in public policy and management, trying to give students a broader view about public policy and management. So this concern is reflected in our curriculum. As I just said, we have faculty members from political sciences and law, sociology, other than economics and management. So we are trying to give a broader knowledge and the theories and integrating them into the analysis of public policy and management. So this is what so far we're trying. And of course, it's not enough. We are still working hard to improve the curriculum to provide more choices in the curriculum arrangement. But so far, we are considering the composition of our faculty members. So that means we very much pay some attention to particular areas when we recruit young talents in the future.
To that, let me add 2 sets of very probably radical comments. The way I look at social sciences in China. In China, we use the term 文科, 2 letters, 2 characters. Very simple, but very misleading. And if we are to translate the 2 characters, tend to be complicated. Humanities, plural forms, and the social sciences, plural forms. So there are a lot of disciplinary knowledge on the 2 characters. And my observation of what we are doing here in China is it seems to me that we tend to be strong in humanities, even though a lot of people here claim that they are doing social sciences. We tend to be unsophisticated in social sciences. And if you look at the United States, when people take social science very seriously, I guess the history is not very long. It's after the First World War, and increasingly so towards using scientific method to analyzing social issues. Now, in China, the president of Peking University, an old president of Peking University, a very famous scholar by the name of Hu Shi, he has a very famous phrase, for the methodology that we use for Chinese social scientists. He said bold assumptions and the system careful validations. So in a sense, we have, to me, it's part of the story, but the whole story probably is bold hypotheses. And we tend not to see the distinction between assumptions and hypotheses. Hypothesis to me is something that you derive from the basic assumption in a logically coherent way, then that need to be tested in the empirical world. But the term, a very key term, falsification, which is very necessary in scientific method, is alien in the Chinese mind. When you say how to falsify the theoretical propositions, and a lot of people will be at a loss. And that sort of addressed the question you raised about research designs, research methodology, the quantitative things we use. These to me are technical things, but how to use those technical things to address a fundamental epistemology question remains an uncertain area in China. But gradually we are moving in that direction. So I partly address that. Curriculum. In the case of School of Government at Peking University, I guess different people have different opinions. But the general direction of the courses we offer to our students is in the area of professional training. We will offer cases that will be supported fundamentally by skills that we learn from political science, because to me, political science is the discipline that you address the issue of how do you use hierarchies, power hierarchies. Economics is the knowledge that we use to give our students a better sense of how market operates. But we have to combine the two sets of knowledge, because reality is a combination of two. There is nothing in this world that we can only see a government without some elements of markets operating. Or there is no case in the world that we only see a market without the shadow of government. So it's always a combination of two. Economics, to me, is methodological individualism. But then an organization is composed of many people. So that calls for an element of sociology. So we are also interested in the disciplinary knowledge of sociology, how people behave in a group of people. Psychology is the same thing. And we should be sensitive to where we come from, where we're going to go. So we also look at history. So that is the structural direction we're moving. But in the process of that, we need to reshuffle resources, financial, personnel, otherwise. And that also has an implication for the kind of people we'll recruit. Now, the third question, relationship between what we do with at the School of Public Policy and the Parties Group. Anything to offer from the panelists?
I would like to say something about this. In Nanjing University, we touched high attention on teaching students the methodology or research approaches for public policy study, especially at the postgraduate level, MA or PhD level. So to enable them, researching into the public policy field with different methods. For example, the political methods, economics methods, and business management methods, even the sociological methods. For example, we teach students, about the theory, economic theory, about the transaction costing. With this theory, to observe, to analyze, to research the public policy. We ask them a question: why we need government? Why we need institution and public policy? Actually, in short, we can use one sentence, one word to answer this question. Just because we need to use this to review Otherwise, policy, government is unnecessary for reducing the transaction cost of the operation of the government, of society, and so on. And for another example, is talking about the relation between politics and the public management and public policy. We are trying to enable students to understand that, all these things are share the same principle. That means we need to, make a better deployment of resources, of public resources, deployment, to integrate the deployment, optimizing the deployment of the resources, especially the public resources. For example, politically speaking, politics is mainly, managing the political resources, power, military force, political institution, and so on. But as for business management and public management, is mainly managing other resources. For example, the financial resources, personal human resources, natural resources, is other social resources, and so on. With these approaches, with these methods, the student can be better understanding, the public policy, the significance of the public management and public policy. Not only stay on the first level about just the practice and practice level. So, for example, recently, 3 of my PhD students is just, already determined their titles for PhD thesis writing. One of the topics is about the supply, public policy supply of local government. The second is about the policy-making agenda for during the past decades, and during the course of the reform of China. The third one is about the policy-making about the state's national key project. They choose this topic to research into those very important things concerning about the public life and concerning about the economy and social development. Thank you.
Something? Yeah. As for the difference of public school and the professional school of public policy in China, I think the main difference are 2 points. First, the public policy school is theoretical or academic oriented, and the public school is practice and ideology oriented. So in the public school, the most important thing is that you should learn the policies, the decision making of the party and the government. Of course, we can also teach some courses of social sciences, but the most important thing is politically correct. And for the policy school, I think we just teach theories, whatever we want. We have a lot of freedom. And secondly, I think the most important difference is the public policy school can provide a degree, and they are degree-oriented one. Although we also have some training programs without degree, but the most part of the education are degree provided. And for the public school, although they also provide some degree, only a few, most of them just have a short-term training program. That means the officials will be promoted in the future, or especially in the near future, and they should have experience of studying at the public school. That's the difference. But if the public officials come to my school, it's not necessary that they will be promoted in the future. They just have experience of academic learning. That's the difference. And as for Peter Zhang's question, I want to also say a few words. That is, how much English literature is involved in our courses. I think in China, mainland China, most English literature are translated into Chinese. So as for students, we just used the Chinese version of English literature. It will be account for, I think, about 60 or 70 of all the reference and biography. And as for the English written literature, I think it's rather few compared with the Chinese translation. So I think about 10 to 20. And others is the Chinese author, the literature by Chinese author. Thank you.
Let me add a few comments which the panelists have nothing to offer. The relation between policy schools and the department school. If we are looking at departments pursuing theoretical research and department school, the leaders have pointed out the direction for the next round of policy implementation. I guess the role of the party school is to have officials recruited to make sure they understand the orientation. So I guess my observation is, my understanding of their role is to make sure the officials will be there to implement a direction that has been already pointed out. For academic research, a healthy element to be is to be skeptical, longer term. Policy schools should set somewhere in between the two extreme poles. And for the MP programs, at least as a normative goal, this is what we are trying to accomplish. Our relationship with the party school, we do not have institutional relationship with the party school on a systematic basis. But on an individual basis, yes. Some of our faculty members also serve as adjunct professors at the party school. And occasionally we'll also invite their professors to come to give lectures, but not semester-based courses. Programs, we are sort of interacted with what the party school is doing, because we are also involved in business of training officials, and some are at the senior level. By way of the party's organization department. That department is the one that holds all key appointments of senior officials there. So in that sense, the information also flows from there to us and from us to our side, to the party school. And I guess we also serve as experimental zones. The programs we run here probably will also serve as models used both at party schools and also the state school or the administration. And incidentally, the state school or the administration is a training arm of the government, similar to the party school, but more on the governmental side. And we, for instance, I mentioned yesterday, we recruit 300 MPA students on a yearly basis. 100 out of 300 is done by way of the state school administration, but we offer our degree because we are in the capacity to offer Beijing University degree. And if you look at the ranking, the bureaucratic ranking of those MPA students, the 100 students tend to be higher, systematically higher than the students that we recruit from the market. For those 100 students, their ranking is somewhere between division level officials and the bureau level officials. So this is what I can offer from our side. Since time is already over, way over, so I just have to stop here. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.